Oh, good.
Hello, JP. How
Hello,
nice to see you.
lovely to see you too.
I wasn't sure if I needed to be outside or if I could send you off from the inside.
Oh no,
Oh,
no.
I'm inside.
Well, we're sort of insidey, outsidey, somewhere in North
Yeah.
London.
Okay.
That's great, but because we're parallel, we're definitely doing desktop pilgrimages.
Yes.
I'm at my desk,
Yes.
and I'm really excited to be going. I had just, I think you might enjoy this. I haven't been able to do anything with it this morning, but one of the other people I invited filmed himself walking around his garden saying he was on his way to meet me, and I thought that was brilliant. Love that. Thanks, Justin.
You're so welcome.
Uh,
So nice to see you as well.
yeah, really good to see you too. I'm so happy that I started this because it's given me this excuse for getting in touch with you. Yeah, it's like
Right.
I'm doing this thing. Can I show you my T-shirt? Geoffrey Chaucer.
Story powered. The best tale wins. Excellent.
Not that it's entirely going to be competitive, but I might do a little bit of storytelling improv games, and some of them are mildly competitive.
Yes.
See how it goes.
Very good.
So
Very great.
when I talked to you yesterday, you said you would be the person to kick me off, send me on my way. And I'm not sure if that means you're walking with me, sort of, and you'll be carrying on, or are you just saying good luck?
Well,
I don't know what that involves.
I might find myself walking with you some of the way, as long as you're prepared for me to take a slightly different route, so that I can meet you if it works out now and again on the way. Then I might be able to do that.
I love that. Or I mean, another way I was trying to think, there's sort of the grammar of this thing is, you could be with me all the time. It's just that you're sort of off camera, or because in the Canterbury Tales, there are people telling the story at one moment, and you're not always hearing the wife of Bath going on about things in the background. So
right.
You might be sort of, I can imagine that you're still walking with me, even if I don't see or hear from you for a bit. So I don't want to make it any pressure on anyone.
Well, the thing I didn't say to you when we spoke, when did we speak? Yesterday? I don't know, the other day. Walking has become incredibly important to me. And some days in the last year or so, I've realized that the only thing that makes sense is to walk. Sometimes I've found that the only thing I can do is walk. And then when that's the case, I just walk. And I have been thinking about, say again?
Can you explain more?
It's quite hard to explain quite what I mean, but when life has not made sense very much, which I have often experienced over the last couple of years, walking has made sense. So I'll give you a good example. So I walk often. I also swim often, but I walk often, swim outside. So I often walk to where I swim and then walk back. But I have started walking instead of using the tube sometimes. So if that means that it takes me 2 hours to get into wherever I'm going, then often I'll do that because that makes sense. It's like what makes sense in my own body. But a particular day I can tell you about, maybe a year ago, about this time last year, I had a bit of work. I was coaching someone in Moorgate. I went to go and do the work. I walked out and I had many plans for the day. And none of them made sense. None of them felt right. And I was caught up in a very big sort of internal self-criticism, like I ought to be more on top of things. I ought to know what to do. And I really didn't. And I realized that the only thing I could do there was one thing I could do that was to make sense, which was to point my feet back towards North London and was to walk, which is what I did. So I just didn't do anything else that day because it's about two and a bit hours, and I just walked, and it was so necessary. It was the only thing I could figure out to do, and it was the right thing to do.
What happened on the walk? I mean, why was it the right thing?
That's such a good question. I don't know that I know the answer to that, because I'm not sure that there's an answer that I can put into language. It's walking for me is self-evidently
right. The feet
the thing. The what? Sorry.
The feet know.
The feet know. My body knows.
Yeah.
I had to walk, and I did.
Yeah.
And so walking has become very powerful walking and pilgrimage of walking has become very important. So I could imagine myself very, very gladly walking from London to Canterbury via Winchester and wherever else. Brilliant. Just as so the thing I know to do, we went to Cornwall in the summer, and I just walked and walked and walked, and I could imagine walking the Cornish coast path very, very happily over some months, and it would make sense.
Yeah, maybe you should. Maybe
I will. No, well, I will. This is going to happen. But so as a thing to do alongside you,
great.
However much I manage to pop up or not,
yes,
my intention would be to find a way to a pilgrimage, a real pilgrimage or a desktop pilgrimage. Yeah. They both have the same powerful resonance.
Yeah.
And if I'm just going to show you something, I have to stand up to get it. Because I was telling a friend of mine who really got this thing about walking, and she sent me this, which now I can't see. Oh, yeah. So I was talking to her, and she said, I completely get it. She's in California. She sent me this book called Planet Walker by John Francis. And John Francis, I think that is him on the cover. He decided one day was that he was just going to walk. That was going to be his life. He spent 22 years walking.
Wow.
And then the book is about all the people he met and what he did along the way, but he walked in silence. So I haven't read the book yet to find out how he got into relationship with people and how he did his PhD and how he did all these things whilst he was walking. Nice. But it really makes sense. So anyway, it's all my way of saying my delight at joining you in some form.
Well, I'm going to definitely think of you being sort of a presence who's nearby as I'm walking, which of course I do. In fact, really do. I walk up to the Heath a bit, and so on and around about here in North London. So I will be walking as well as walking.
Yes.
And I'm going to. So please, by all means, as much as it's something you might like to imagine that I am also loitering when you would like that.
Yes.
And so if you're out on a walk and you think, I wonder if JP's around, I'm there.
You're there.
And if you're not,
very good. Very good. Well, I will be walking a lot over the coming weeks in exactly that way.
Great. And I told you something that I'm doing lots of until this catastrophe happened, I've been doing lots of talks about mental health, and I told you that I was advised by someone who was helping me with mine when I had a breakdown, that walking and exercise was the best thing I could do. So before getting any other help, I got some trainers, and I walked a lot around London. And this is partly where I got this idea of pilgrimages, because I started walking, and because money was tight, because but obviously not being well, I didn't really want to go in cafes all the time, because I couldn't sit down in a cafe without buying a coffee. I didn't need another coffee anyway, so I'd go into churches. And then I remembered that I'd studied Chaucer and the Canterbury Tales, and I love it. I love the idea of telling and sharing stories, and I like the walking. And I thought, there's something in this. And there are some amazing churches in central London, which I've never been in. And I thought, wow, this is really something. Anyway, then I met some other people who are sort of rebuilding the British tradition of pilgrimages, and went with them. And I told you about this, and I'm sort of a bit ambivalent, because I don't want this to seem overwhelmingly a religious project or sort of too deeply spiritual, but I don't want it not to be, because it is. What was your take on that?
On which part of it, JP?
Well, the kind of spiritual but not spiritual thing.
Well, I think, it's partly my ongoing answer to your earlier question. For me, walking is clearly a spiritual practice. There's absolutely no doubt. Whether you couch it in the form of a particular religion, which and a religion may or may not be a spiritual thing.
Yes.
I think religions often aren't. Yeah. That's the way in which walking makes sense to me, and it's no surprise to me that walking is a part of many religious and spiritual paths. In fact, there's almost certainly a reason why they're often called paths.
Yes.
Right, because there's a metaphorical walking.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that churches at their best are an expression of a path, not as a not as a fixed thing. I suppose the danger with the church is it looks like it's a fixed thing, when in fact what I think it's probably meant to be is a way that people can walk a path together.
Yes.
In a way it's quite similar to a desktop pilgrimage, right? You go to the same place, but somehow you're walking something by being there, if you're doing it right.
Yes.
So it makes complete sense to me. And I have this similar experience. I don't know if it's a similar experience to you, but when I hear you talk about it, feels like a similar experience to me, that walking and going into sacred spaces, and particularly churches in this country, because there are a lot of churches around, they seem very closely related endeavors. And I was just thinking whilst you were talking about it, in fact I was thinking about this since we spoke the other day, about the difference between churches and cafes. If you just take away the attachment to a particular religious tradition, that cafes are filled with interruption. I mean, mostly what they're a great big sort of interruptive activity, particularly in London, where there's always music. You can't find a quiet place. And whereas a church is somewhere that you can go where it's possible to get in contact with yourself in a way that's really, really hard in a cafe.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, at least for me, is what walking is like. They're really similar activities.
Yeah. Yeah, they are.
So I'm really with you. I will very happily, metaphorically, and if there is ever a chance, physically join you in a church, because it's an extraordinary thing to be able to do.
Great. And we shared our the other day when we were talking, and it wasn't recorded, we shared our enthusiasm for psalms.
Yes.
Which I have discovered as part of this process of popping into churches and so on. And I'm a big fan of some of the psalms. I've memorized whole chunks of them. And I love the way that they express different emotional states of being and yearnings and so on. And I hadn't realized how many of them I'm kind of quoting all the time anyway, because they're one of those things that have totally got into the language. And you told me about a particular translation, and you were going to send me off with this. Can you tell me? I
am indeed going to do it. Well, I'll tell you about the translation, and I'll tell you. I can read you this psalm as well. So one of the things about psalms, it strikes me, is a lot of them were written with the voice of somebody who's in trouble. Their yearnings for a life and a world in which our troubles are taken seriously. Like the psalmists don't shy away from what a human life is like when we're in difficulty, but they also always hold out the possibility that simply by telling the truth about what we long for and what we're experiencing, that something redemptive might happen from it.
Yeah.
And I love that about the Psalms, and that they're not, they're really far from sort of magical incantations. It's not like you read a Psalm and it's guaranteed to do something, and yet there's something very, very real about them that makes them powerful in that way. So I came across, I'm familiar with Psalms from my own Jewish background.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the wonderful thing about the Psalms is that they exist in many, many different forms. They got taken up into Christianity, and I don't know if they're in Islam as well. But the book of Psalms that I love the most is a book by Norman Fisher, who is Jewish and a Zen Buddhist priest.
Great.
And the book, which is called Turning to You, is a book of Norman's Zen-inspired translations of the Psalms. So he finds language. One of the things that's so beautiful about it is he finds language for the Psalms that's not exactly the way anybody else would render the Psalm. It's not the sort of the archaic English of some of the English translations that come through the church. It's not a literal translation of the Hebrew. It's a poetic translation. And the one that I love the most is actually a very good one for heading out on a journey, particularly if you think that there might be uncertainty or peril or who knows what on the journey. And it's Psalm 16, and it's called I Place My Trust Only in You. So one of the things I'm going to say before I read it to you, JP, as a way of sending you off, is I love in Norman's translations how he has taken God's language and simply rendered it as relational language. So he simply talks about you. And you could be all kinds of things, right? There's so many different ways of reading what another that we're in relationship might be. And that is one of the things I think is beautiful and brilliant about this, because it makes it so accessible that we don't have to have
it really opens doors.
Yeah, right. So here we go. Shall I read it? Would you like to hear it?
Yeah.
Protect me from fear, for I place my trust only in you. My soul has said, you are my guardian, sole foundation of my happiness, and I will find my delight in all that is yours on earth. As for all that shuts you out, great will be their sorrow. I will not pour out their offerings, nor call their names, even in my dreams. You, only you, are my share and my cup. You have drawn my lot, and it has fallen out agreeably. Lovely indeed is my estate. My heritage is pleasant to me. I bless you who brought me to this day. And even at night, in the trying times, my trembling body is tethered to you. Your presence is always before me. In all the deeds of my hand, I will not be shaken from it. So my heart rejoices, my spirit is glad, and my body rests secure. For you will not abandon my soul to darkness. You will not suffer me to be overwhelmed in terror. You will teach me the path towards life. Your presence is my sweetest joy. Your right hand is my chief delight. Always.
Thank you. Great.
You're welcome.
I love, there are little bits that have got into my head in there. And I'm not going to comment on them now because I'm going to want to listen to it again. But I'm immensely grateful to you, Justin, because I wanted this to be unspecifically a kind of a sort of a spiritual blessing as a journey, entertaining. I think it was my heart is glad, or my spirit is glad. Anyway, it was in there somewhere. My heart rejoices, my spirit is glad, I think. And so I'm going to definitely aim for those.
Right.
And accept that there are those, the difficult times at night and all of that. So I want it all to be part of this. And I feel like I've been set off with a real blessing. Thank you.
Good. Well, you're very welcome. Well, it is a genuine, intended to be a blessing, and I will be so pleased to join you somewhere along the way.
Brilliant. I have this last thought which just occurred to me while we were talking. The thing about the Chaucer and the storytelling. And I think there was a mild competition in there, because I think that the person who told the story that they all liked best was going to get a meal paid for or something. I'm not really bothered about the competitive element. I've already asked a few people who I know who are writers of various sorts, both published and not published, to tell some stories. And it's only just now dawned on me that I'd quite like to have little titles for them. So in Chaucer, it's the Pardoner's Tale and the Merchant's Tale and the Wife of Bath's Tale. Can I just invite you to think whether you would like to tell a tale, and then to think what would be your title, the what tale, what would you call yourself? Because the 21st century is going to need different titles.
What a great question. I certainly don't have an immediate response to it.
Okay. Well, maybe.
But if I'm coming back to join you at some point, I will by then probably have something to say about this.
Great.
And if on your pilgrimage you're amenable to messages reaching you, I don't know, Chaucer would not have had the means that we have for messages to reach, but I can send you a message this way.
Definitely.
then I will shortly have something to say on that with great delight. Fantastic.
If you could record it on video, that would be wonderful, because then other people, assuming that anyone else actually pays any attention to this, other people also will be able to hear it and might be inspired and prompted to do something similar. Okay. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Really good to see you. See you soon. Let me know when I can join you again, and travel well on the beginning of this pilgrimage.
Will do. Thank you for my blessing.